And welcome back, everybody. So on this episode of the Rugby Review, we're going to be going through both Champions plus Challenge Cup semi-final action. And we're going to start with the Champions Cup. And this is what the Champions Cup bracket looked like heading into the semi-final. We had Bordeaux versus Bath, and then on the other side of the bracket, we had Leinster versus Toulon. So this was the results of the semi-final action between the two teams. We had a very close game between Leinster and Toulon, and Bordeaux showed some pretty solid dominance over Bath during their game. So the first game we're going to go through is Leinster versus Toulon, where Leinster held on to the lead to beat Toulon by a score of 29-25. And again, this actually ended up being a very close game. During the course of the game, I was actually getting kind of nervous that Leinster was going to blow out Toulon, and this wasn't really going to be a close game. But Toulon was persistent. They hung in there. They tried to make a very late comeback, and they almost did, but Leinster was able to hold on and maintain a lead that they had established and get the victory to go to the championship game for the Champions Cup. So as we kind of go through the stats here, that late surge by Toulon seemed to have evened a lot of these stats out a little bit. So tries scored, 4 tries for Leinster, 3 for Toulon. Possessions split very evenly, very slight edge towards Leinster. Leinster was a bit more dominant in the territory stat. Didn't seem to bother Toulon too much. They ended up making more post-contact meters and had a significant number more clean breaks as well. But even with the territory advantage, it was pretty even Stevens who was on defense, who was playing offense. Toulon had a very slight edge again in post-contact meters. Big advantage in clean breaks for Toulon, and then everything else was pretty comparable, except Leinster was dominant in the turnover game at ruck time. So, again, it ended up being a close game. It was good for Toulon to fight back to narrow the gap towards the end of the game, but good on Leinster for being able to hold strong, keep their lead, and make it back to the championship game yet again. So, now to the other game between Bordeaux and Bath. This, again, fairly close game. But Bordeaux at home is just a very, very strong team. So Bordeaux ended up getting the victory this game by a score of 38-26 over Bath. And let's take a look at the stats here. I didn't realize Bath had the majority of the possession during this game. As I was watching this game, you're watching it and you're just seeing Bordeaux make a lot of these great runs, cutting through Bath's defense with the possession that they had. But it was actually, Bath was holding their own. Bordeaux was just a bit more efficient and clinical this game. And Bath had a little bit more penalties during the course of this game. That gave Bordeaux a few extra scoring opportunities, kind of really stretched the lead out a bit more. But again, very close physical game here, as you could imagine with any French team. Possession was a bit more skewed towards Bath, where territory was not even, slight advantage to Bath, but much more even than what the possession stat is. And with that possession stat being skewed towards Bath, it makes sense as to why Bordeaux had to make 191 tackles during the course of the game. Bath just holding on to the ball more. Bordeaux's got to play defense, keep Bath from scoring, so on and so forth. But even with the possession disadvantage, Bordeaux was still able to have the same amount of meters made during the course of the game. 254 post-contact meters for Bordeaux, 262 for Bath. So again, despite the disadvantage in possession, Bordeaux still very clinical, still very efficient. Just offensively, they're just an offensive machine, truly. And you kind of see that with clean breaks, most certainly. 10 clean breaks for Bordeaux to just 5 for Bath. And that's on, pretty similar amount of missed tackles for each team. But, when Bath only has 91 tackles made, but missed 29 of them, that's kind of shocking and eye-opening. So kind of makes sense as to why Bordeaux was able to kind of cut him to ribbons at some point in time. So again, good, strong earned victory for Bordeaux at home this week, the semifinal round. We see Bordeaux actually returning to the championship game for the second year in a row, and so we'll see if Bordeaux can be back-to-back champions. So that'll be exciting. Now let's take a look at the Challenge Cup semifinals. You'll have to pardon me for the potato quality picture. This is the best I could find. So on the left side of the screen, we had Montpellier versus the Dragons from the URC. And then on the right side of the bracket here, we had Ulster versus Exeter. So here are the final results. The first game that was played was the right side of the bracket, which we see Ulster having a very dominating win over Exeter, winning by a score of 29-12. So let's look at that stat line there. And it was a bit of a slow start to this game. It took about 30 minutes for both teams to really get their mojo going, to get that scoring going as well. But once both teams started to get on the board, it was really Ulster, especially in the second half, that was able to hit the accelerator pedal and, really stretch this lead as the second half went on. So, possession territory actually flip-flopped, where Ulster had the possession advantage, but Exeter had the territory advantage. Super physical game. Both teams are making over 170 tackles apiece. Very comparable amount of missed tackles between both teams. It's interesting to see as well. Exeter has a significant amount more post-contact meters than Ulster does. Exeter ended up having 339 post-contact meters to just 222 for Ulster. So it's not like Exeter wasn't able to kind of break down Ulster's defensive wall or anything like that. Exeter just didn't execute, didn't really take advantage of the opportunities they had this week. And you can really see that in turnovers lost, especially. 19 turnovers lost for Exeter in this game to just 7 for Ulster. Semifinal or not, 19 turnovers lost during the course of the game is a huge number. And that is a huge number in any game, but in the semifinal, it's too much for anybody to overcome usually. It was too much for Exeter to overcome this game. And then Ulster also had strong defense with 8 turnovers won at ruck time as well. So Exeter isn't doing themselves any favor, and Ulster is making it difficult as well with strong defense throughout the game. So strong win for Ulster with a huge surge in the second half to win this game, which sees them going to the Challenge Cup Champions game. And if we go back to our scorecard here, we see that Ulster will be playing Montpellier after Montpellier was able to beat the Dragons by a score of 18-12. So this was a much closer game than the Ulster-Exeter game. It was a low-scoring, physical, defensive game. But once Montpellier got the lead, they were able to hold and maintain the lead for the rest of the game. And so, as we go through our stats here, we can see even amount of tries scored between the two teams, but Montpellier was able to kind of exert force against the Dragons and make the Dragons have to play a bunch more defense during the course of the game. They had the possession advantage with 56% possession, and they had the territory advantage with 61% territory. So they're playing a lot of ball in the Dragons' half. Dragons are having to put in a defensive shift. They didn't have to make all that many tackles, though, but they did have to put in a defensive shift to really try to keep Montpellier from blowing this lead out, in which Dragons did do a good job of that. Dragons were able to have 9 turnovers at ruck time, kind of keeping Montpellier from having any additional tries scored. In addition, both teams had a lot of handling errors, which kept both teams from really scoring much more during the course of this game. So, good win for Montpellier. Gives them a lot of good momentum heading towards the end of their season as well. So we will see Montpellier in the finals against Ulster. And so here we have the final game of Bordeaux versus Leinster in the Champions Cup. It's not this weekend, but May 23rd, Saturday, May 23rd, is when the Champions Cup will be taking place. And then here we have the Challenge Cup as well, which will be taking place on Friday, the day before, where we have Montpellier against Ulster. So both games should be fun, should be exciting to watch. Can't wait for it. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you liked the video enough, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, or feel free to share this with somebody. Again, thank you for making it this far in the video, and I will see you for the next one. Enjoy your rugby this week.